Okay, when we talk about electrical circuits, these are the 4 learning outcomes that we should know. In fact, 3 learning outcomes. We should be able to draw circuit diagrams and circuit components. We should be able to work out series and parallel circuits, and action and use of circuit components is what we should know by the end of this chapter. So whenever we talk about electric circuits mein you make circuit diagrams, and the minimum requirement for any electric circuit is what? You need a power supply, a load, a connecting lead. Power supply, load, connecting lead. So if you don't have a power supply, then the circuit is of no use because you have no current flowing in it. Then if you have a power supply but you have no load, again the power supply is of no use because there's no load, there's no component which consumes the power. And if you have both of them but you have no connecting leads, then these two are idle, they are not connected, they both are of no use. So these 3 are the basic requirements, and to make your circuit more simpler, you need a switch as well. So these are the main requirements of any electrical circuits, the basic requirement of any electrical circuit.
Sir, resistors
Yes.
नहीं use होंगे?
They would be. Load is a resistor,
Okay.
right? So having done that, these are the circuit symbols once again. Cell, battery of cells, more than one cells connected, you can make it like this, or you can just make 2 cells and a dotted line in between them. This will represent a battery. This is a symbol for power supply, a symbol for DC power supply, a symbol for alternating current power supply, a fixed resistor. Then you have a switch, you have an earth or ground given by this symbol. You have junction of conductors, means you have these wires joined together. You have a lamp over here, this is a motor, and this is a generator. Then you have a variable resistor like this, a thermistor, just see the difference between the two. A light dependent resistor, see it's this same fixed resistor but light shining on it. Then you have a heater, you have a potential divider, you have transformer, this is a magnetizing coil, you have ammeter, voltmeter, diode, LED, light emitting diode, fuse, relay coil, oscilloscope. These are some of the circuit symbols. Now what's next is series and parallel circuits. So when we talk about series and parallel circuits, the first thing that we are going to consider is series circuits. And when we discuss series circuits, this is a basic diagram to represent a series circuit. You have a power source, you have a switch, and then of course you have load, this one and this one. So this is resistor 1, this is resistor 2, and you must have an ammeter connected in series, right? This is the second ammeter, this is the third ammeter. You can connect ammeter anywhere in the circuit. Ammeter is used to measure current and it can be connected anywhere, right? But it must be connected in series, you need to make sure that, right? So in a series circuit, what is the one-liner? The components, the loads or the resistors or the lamps are connected in chain. So what's the main keyword of a series circuit? It's a chain. It's a chain, right? They are connected in chain, one after the other. They are connected in chain, one after the other. This is what we call a series circuit. And then if I talk about current stays the same through each component. Whatever is the current through R1, same would be the current through R2, and so on. So that's the reason you can connect ammeter anywhere in the circuit in series. So let's say you have these 3 resistors, R1, R2, R3. Let's let's have this current I1, current I2 and current I3 over here. You will find that since it's a series combination, the resistors are connected in chain. Current at R3 is the same as current at R2, it's the same as the current at R1, right? So whatever the current I is coming out of the power source of the battery, that same is the current through R1, that same is the current through R2, that same is the current through R3. So I can say I1 is equals to I2, that's equal to I3, and all that equals to I. Is it? Then if I talk about voltage, I have talked about current. Current in series stays the same. Current in series stays the same. If I talk about voltage, voltage from the source is shared between all components. Voltage from the source is shared between all components, right? So let's say each of the resistors have a voltage V1, V2, V3 respectively, just like this. R1, R2, R3, each of them have voltage V1, V2 and V3, right? So if I sum them up, the total PD of this series circuit would be the sum of these individual voltages. The total PD, meaning the total voltage, would be the sum of these individual voltages, right? And remember what is PD? Just discussed in the previous topic. PD is potential difference, which is work done per unit charge, which is work done per unit charge, right? So moving further, total PD, which I call VT, is equals to V1 plus V2 plus V3, right? So this was rule number 1, that current stays the same in series circuit. Rule number 2, the total PD of a series circuit is the sum of individual PDs of all components, right? So let's say one of these resistors has a value of 2 ohms, the other has a value of 4 ohms, and you have a power supply of 12 volts. So what will happen? The PD would be shared between them, right? In the ratio, in a ratio, right? So let's say if I make the ratio, it would be 2:4, that is 1:2, that is 1:2. So what's the total voltage? It's 12 volts. It would be shared in 2 parts, such that one part is 1 and the other part is double of that. Why? Because see, this is 2 ohms resistor, this is 4 ohms resistor. So this resistance is half of this. That means out of the source voltage 12 volts, this one would get half the voltage as compared to this one. Or in other words, I can say that this 4 ohms resistor would get twice the voltage as of the 2 ohms, right? So can you tell me how can we divide this 12 volts so we get the division in this ratio?
What are you asking?
How can I divide the 12 volts? So I have a ratio 1:2. So look here what I'll do. The first combination I can make is 1 volt and 11 volt. No. Is this double of this? No. I can make 2 and 10. Is this double of this? No. I can make 3 and 9. Is this double of this? No. I can make 4 and 8. Is this double of this? Yes. So this is the right combination, right? This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. This is a 1:2 ratio, just like this one.
Yes.
Right? So that means this R1 would get how much? 4 volts. This R2 would get how much? 8 volts. See, is this 8 volts double of this?
Yes.
Right. Why? Because this 4 ohms is double of this. Alright? Okay. Then The PD across each resistor will depend on what? On the resistance of the resistor. You have just seen it over here that this resistor had 2 ohms resistance, so it got 4 volts. That's half of the voltage of the second resistor. Why? Because the second resistor has double the resistance. So what will be the PD across a component? What will be the PD across a resistor will depend on what? It will depend on the resistance of the resistor, right?
Right.
So if you have just 2 resistors, right? How much? Just 2 resistors. Then the ratio of resistance or ratio of resistors will be equal to ratio of their PDs. Okay, what do I mean by this? Let's say you have R1 and R2. So if I say ratio of R1 and R2, what do I mean? I mean to say that it's R1 upon R2. R1 upon R2. When I say ratio of R1 and R2, I say R1 upon R2 is equal to what? The voltage ratio of voltages. This will get voltage 1, this will get voltage 2. So the ratio of voltages will be ratio of resistances will be equal to ratio of voltages. Ratio of resistors will be equal to ratio of voltages, right? So ratio of resistors equal to ratio of voltages. This is valid for 2 resistors only, right? So now what do I mean by that? See, this was 2 ohms, this was 4 ohms. So what's the ratio of resistances? 2 upon 4. 2 upon 4.
4.
Right. What's the ratio of voltages? 4 upon 8. 4 upon 8. So if you simplify 2 upon 4, it will become 1 upon 2. And if you simplify 4 upon 8, it will also become 1 upon 2. Right. So is this point valid? If you have 2 resistors, the ratio of their voltages is equal to the ratio of the PDs, just like this. Is it?
Yes.
Right. So I have talked about current, I have talked about PD in a series circuit. I have talked about current and I have talked about PD in a series circuit. Now let's talk about resistance in a series circuit. So if you have resistors connected in a series circuit, in a series R1, R2 and R3, what would be the combined resistance? What would be the effective resistance? What would be the total resistance? To understand that, see, I can take 3 resistors R1 and R2 and R3 to make a certain resistance in the circuit, or I can just take one large resistance which is equivalent to the sum of these resistors, which has an equal effect as these 3 resistors have all together, right? So that means resistance in series would be equal to what? The sum of individual resistances. Combined resistance, total resistance in series would be what? Would be equal to the sum of individual resistances, right? Alright. So see, is that understood? This is the formula. Whenever you have series circuit, you find the resistance this way. Got it?
Yes.
Right. So we do not have this derivation to be done in the paper, but just for the sake of this lesson, we'll see how this formula comes about. So we have already established this fact that V, that's the total voltage, is the sum of individual voltages. And we know that V is what? V is equals to IR. V is equals to IR. So if V is equals to IR, I can either say V equals V1 plus V2 plus V3, or I can also say IR is equals to IR1 plus IR2 plus IR3. Is that the same?
Yes.
Right. So it's IR is equals to IR1 plus IR2 plus IR3. Why I'm using the same I everywhere?
Because
the same I everywhere for every resistor. Why? Because current and series stays the same. Current and series stays the same. I just established this fact over here. I1, I2, I3. All of them are what? I. I1 is I, I2 is I, I3 is I. Right?
right.
So that means I can simplify that. I can take I common and it would be IR is equals to I R1 plus R2 plus R3. Right?
Yes.
And then you can see that I and I can get cancelled on both sides. I and I can get cancelled. Right? So you are left with what? R is equals to R1 plus R2 plus R3. Proved? Understood?
Yes.
Alright. Now, you have these two resistors connected in series, right? You see this is 1 ohms, this is 2 ohms, right? So I told you that voltages divide in ratio. This is 3 volts, this 3 volts would divide in such a way that this gets one portion and this gets twice the voltage, right? So this 3 would be 1 volt and this 2 ohms would receive 2 volts. You have those same 2 resistors, but you have a new EMF 6 volts. This 6 volts would again divide in ratio. What ratio? 1:2. So if you divide this in a ratio of 1:2, that means 1 ohms will get 2 volts and 2 ohms will get 4 volts, right? Similarly, you have another circuit, same resistances, this time you have 9 volts. You need to divide this 9 volts in such a way that one of the resistor gets 1 portion and the second gets 2 portions of the EMF, right? So if this gets 3 volts, this gets 6 volts. Does that make it 9 over here? 2 and 4, does that make it 6 over here? 2 and 1, does that make it 3 over here? So I can say that the total PD in a circuit, in a series circuit, is the sum of individual PDs. And added to that, I can say that the total PD is what? It's the EMF of the source, isn't it?
Yes. Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Sir, 1/2 का रेशियो है ना, तो फिर ये 1/2 क्यों नहीं बन रहा?
Which one?
The last one.
It is 1/2. 3/6 is what? 3 ones are
Oh.
3 twos.
तो ऐसे ही से है.
Right? Okay. And then you have these two resistors once again, 2 ohms and 1 ohms, right? But this time you have 12 volts. Can you guess what would be the voltage across 1 ohms and what across 2 ohms?
6 and 2, I think.
6 and 2. So you need to divide it in 1:2 ratio, right? Okay, let's try 1
Yes.
and 11. No. 2 and 10 possible? No. 3 and 9 possible? No. 4 and 8 possible?
No.
No.
No. No, sorry. Yes, yes.
It is possible, right? So 4 is to 8. 1 ohms would get 4 volts and the 6 ohms would get 2 ohms would get 8 volts, right? Got it? Now you have again 2 resistors. One is 1 ohm, the other one is 2 ohms. 3 volts is the voltage available. So similarly, that same circuit. Okay, but this time now you have changed the resistances. One is 2 ohms, the other one is 4 ohms, right? And the voltage you have is 3 volts. So again 2 ohms and 4 ohms. Does that make a ratio of 1:2?
Yes.
So that means the 2 ohms get 1 volt and the 4 ohms get 2 volts. Is it?
Yes.
You have another set of resistors, 4 ohms and 8 ohms. Does 4 and 8 ohms make a ratio of 1:2? Yes. Right? And so this 3 volt is going to be divided in this ratio. Got it? Then you have 3 ohms and 6 ohms. Again 1:2 ratio.
Yes.
Right? So 3 volts is divided into 1:2. Got it? So voltage divides. In series, voltage divides. Or voltage is shared between components, right? But in parallel, the voltage stays the same and current divides. Got it?